Welcome to Event Domination. Happy New Year. We are back in the studio. It is January. Very much looking forward to 2025. And today I'm going to be sharing some truths about using volunteers with your event. This is a whole bunch, this is a compilation of all the lessons I've learned scaling my conference, running workshops, because we have used volunteers, we have not used volunteers. There's pros and cons. So today I'm just going to be telling you exactly what to do if you are running a conference, whether it's a huge conference with thousands and thousands of people or a small workshop of a couple hundred people and everything in between. So let's get started with the pros and cons of actually using volunteers. And I'm going to give you a whole bunch of different options and ways you can do it down the road. So with volunteers, and I understand why you would want to use volunteers for your event, and it's probably the same reason I use volunteers my first year. It's, hey, I've got all of these staffing slots I have to fill, whether it's at registration, whether it's at the info desk, whether it's just having people in the room to point everybody in the right direction, set up, take down, unloading everything. There's a lot of different roles and tasks. And when you're a first year event, or you're just starting out, or if your budget's not there because your revenue streams aren't there, which is something we can definitely help you with. But if you're having trouble in any of those areas, it's natural to want to gravitate towards using volunteers, because volunteers, it's cheap labor. Sure, you're going to feed them and all that type of stuff, but it's a lot cheaper to use a volunteer than it is to actually pay or have somebody on your staff or pay somebody for the duration of that event. Now, this is what happens when you use volunteers. Let's say you get 20 people who express interest in volunteering for your event. And a couple days before, you run through the setup, you confirm, hey, are you good? Everything's good. This is all your time. Every single time, I don't care what happens, every single time, out of 20 people, you'll probably have 12 show up. That's just what happens because you're not paid. There's no accountability. And the challenge with volunteers is, because you're not paying them, you can't hold anybody accountable. It's, hey, I feel like showing up. I don't feel like showing up. So you have a big unknown, and you have a big question mark as to, well, who's actually going to show and how long are they going to stay for? Because let's say you have your schedule set up, you need somebody for 8 hours, they're a volunteer. There's nothing keeping them there on site because they're not getting paid. Maybe they want to stay for the free lunch. And then they take off. So when you just have to understand, if you are going to go the route of using volunteers, there's no accountability. They're not sticking around. It's kind of like herding cats. That's probably the best example to use. It's like herding cats. Now, why would somebody actually volunteer their time to work at your event? Well, most often it's because they can't afford to pay for an actual ticket to your event and they want to get in the door and experience it. Fair enough, right? Fair enough. Now, there are challenges or issues that come up with that. When you have your big keynote speakers on stage, the people everybody wants to see, what happens? All of your volunteers will mysteriously disappear because they wanted to get in the event anyway. That's why they volunteered, because they couldn't afford the ticket. Now, when the big guns are on stage that everybody wants to see and you need your volunteers, well, you won't be able to find them because they're going to be in the room watching the people that they wanted to watch, which is why they volunteered with your event in the first place, right? So that you just have to understand where people are coming from and why they're looking to volunteer their time. Oftentimes it's a monetary issue where they can't afford coming into your event, so they're going to exchange sweat equity, but you just have to understand that they want to see the event. That's why they're volunteering in the first place. So when you really need them, when everybody's watching the big guy on stage, you won't be able to find them because you're going to have to comb through all of your attendees to find the volunteers. And, just to take you back in time, in my first year, when I first launched the conference, coming out of all the shutdowns and the pandemic and everything too, we used volunteers because, number one, I didn't know any better. But number two, we had an events person we had hired who was supposed to be really experienced, know what they were doing. And 4 weeks away from the event, we realized that they had no clue what they were doing and nothing had been done. So, it was my first time doing it. I didn't know any better. We're like, oh, we'll just use volunteers. And we ran into the exact same issues. So number one, we had a bunch of people volunteer, oftentimes because they were students and they couldn't afford a ticket, or they couldn't afford a ticket, they were older, and they wanted to exchange sweat equity in exchange for getting in, right? We had a lot of people express interest. We had the pre-event meetings, all of that type of stuff. And actually, I remember on the volunteer meeting, a bunch of people were like, hey, well, I just want to sit in and watch all the sessions I want to watch. It's like, well, no, like we're working on the back end. We have staffing. Oh, well, I'm not showing up then. I just want to get in the door. These were actual conversations that we had in that orientation meeting leading up to the event. So out of, I forget how many, Katie would probably know how many volunteers we had, but we had a whole bunch, and then that shrank because we gave people the bad news that you just don't get free access. And then on the day of the event, we had X number of people who needed to show up, and how many people actually showed up? About half, right? So, and this is why I'm bringing this up, because if you are expecting to use volunteers, very, very unreliable, so unreliable. But that's the nature of the beast, right? You're just dealing with people who want to get in, and there's no accountability. And then when we had setup and takedown and everything, man, it was like herding cats. You couldn't find anybody. People decided to take random breaks. They just disappeared. Then they decided to come back. No accountability. So if I had to do everything all over again my first year, or if you're thinking of using volunteers in any capacity for your event, and you're running a professional event where people are paying a decent amount to get in, you're really looking at building a really good event, I would not use volunteers at all. So let me give you some options and different ways you can do this, because volunteers just don't work. And even if it's not volunteers, so let me give you a couple examples. We've even had people that we've hired specific to the event. Hey, come out to the event and help us out. We'll pay you for the 3-4 days, because I don't do volunteer stuff anymore. Like, hey, we'll actually pay you for doing this. And the challenge I found with that as well is people just want to get in the door, and then they'll mail it in, and the quality of the work is not there. So let me just break down exactly what you want to do rather than relying on that type of stuff, because it doesn't work. Okay. So there's two ways you can do this, and there's pros and cons. So method number one is use your own staff. Now, the pro is there are people in your organization. So you have extreme accountability. They're on your team. You know them. They're working with your company. Like they're just their loyalty is to the company because that's what pays them. Huge bonus. Now, the challenge is with the events. So let's say you're running a massive event with, like 5,000 people, and you have an organization and you got 20 people on your team. Those 20 people will not be sufficient to man and staff everything you need staff. Like you'll need like hundreds of people with 5,000 people, hundreds, right? So it doesn't make economic sense to have all of these people on your payroll just for this one event, right? Unless you can use them and put them to work in other areas. It just doesn't make sense. And that's the messy, ugly part of running events, right? You're running your normal business. Now with the event, you've got different roles, different responsibilities that aren't really, your staff doesn't handle them day to day, and now you're going to put them and try and fit them in these roles, and then it just gets really, really messy. But if you do have a massive organization, right, and you do have a massive team, and you've got a marketing events team in place, amazing, because these are the people that are going to roll every single event that you run, boom, 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 and then it's really good. Now, the solution to this is temp staff. Now, let me explain, because you're probably rolling your eyes right now, and I don't mean your typical temp staffing agency. So most people think, when they think of temp staffing, it's like, oh, well, I go to the local job bank people and they'll have all of these people that are hunting for jobs, and then I'll be able to pay. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about with temp staffing is specific staffing companies that fulfill roles for events and conferences. For instance, there are companies out there that will provide registration staff for your event. These are companies that they provide staff with, every single week. They do registration for all of these conferences, and they know what to do. They've probably seen most of the registration systems out there. They know the drill. They've seen it. They show up. They're all dressed the same. They're professional. They know what to do. They've seen all the issues. The management is generally very, very good, because they see hundreds of events every single year that they work at specific to registration. Perfect. That's who you would be looking for if you don't have the in-house staff to accommodate that. And let me tell you, if you have, let's say you're pulling Sally from HR to do registration at your event, don't do that. Bring in the role-specific people, like the temp staffing agency people, but for registration. That's who you're looking for. Same thing with security. Hire an event security team. There are security companies out there who actually do security at events. And there's some really, really good ones, and there's some really, really bad ones. We've had some bad ones in the past where we had, like a 5'2", 120-pound security person who was supposed to be looking after this former professional athlete who was huge. That's not what you're looking for. But there are event-specific security companies out there who are quite good. And so when you're looking for, and then in terms of parking, if you have a massive parking operation where you have thousands of people coming in to park, there are companies out there who will actually staff and run your parking and run valet for you and all of that type of stuff. Don't put your graphic designer guy out in the parking lot with the traffic cones and the vest and all that stuff. It's not going to go very well. And this is what I mean. Like, you don't have to rely on volunteers. You can hire specific companies who specialize in this, and you're paying them. What does that give you? That gives you accountability. So if you're paying a company who does this full time, and this is what they do, and they're really good, and you need 30 guys in the parking lot to direct everybody because you've got a massive event, guess what? On the day, you're probably going to have 30 guys show up with the manager, because this is what they do every single day. You're not going to have to deal with having 30 volunteers sign up. You're going to lose 5 in the orientation, and then on the day you're going to lose another 10. You're not going to be dealing with that. Now, do you have to pay these people? Absolutely. It's going to cost you to bring in people like this. Now, if you don't have the money, something's broken with your event. Okay, so let me break down exactly how you can support bringing in experts like this, because you need it. Unless you have an in-house events team, you're going to need a bunch of people, like registration, parking, security, like the ushers, all of that. You need those people, and don't use volunteers. So when we're talking about events, right, this is the revenue triad of events. You've got 3 revenue streams. You have tickets, you have sponsorship, and then you have back end. Now, today, for our purposes, we're going to deal with tickets and sponsorship, because back end, that's the product sales you're selling at the event. That money comes after. We need to get revenue in the door before the event so you can actually pay for these people to fulfill and give your attendees a good experience, right? So we've got tickets and sponsorship. With tickets, you have to make sure that you're charging enough money not only to support the cost of running the event, but also the marketing, but also the staffing costs. And too many events, especially the ones that aren't growing, they don't charge enough money for their tickets. Number one, that sends a signal to the market that your event's not very good. But number two, you're not giving yourself the revenue you need to actually invest in the event and fulfill on something that people actually want to show up to and they'll come back for the next year. Huge mistake. Almost every single event that we work with, we rework their ticket tiers because they're not charging enough or they're not set up the right way. With sponsorship is a huge missed opportunity with a lot of events because you've got your umbrella topic that your event's going to cover, your big promise. Maybe it's, hey, I'm going to help you grow your business. But within your audience, there are these subgroups, these groups of people that have, yes, that challenge, that want that promise, but maybe they have an HR issue. Maybe they have a CRM software issue, like whatever it is, and you're not covering that on the main stage. Perfect opportunity to have an HR company come in. You can work out a sponsorship opportunity with them, and they can solve that issue for your audience, for those people that have that issue. They're not stepping on your toes and your back end, but you are able, through leveraging sponsorship the right way, not only are you monetizing that and you're bringing in additional revenue that you wouldn't have otherwise, so you can reinvest it, but you're also offering a more complete solution to your attendees, because now they're not just showing up learning how to scale their business. They're like, hey, a third of your audience has an HR issue. Well, guess what? Now they can actually get that solved. So it turns out to be a better solution for your audience, which is really what you want, right? Because if you're able to offer a better solution, guess what? They're going to come back again next year because now they're going to have another layer of issues as they scale their business. Does that make sense? So you really want to focus on maximizing ticket revenue, but also sponsorship revenue. And that's going to give you the money you need up front to actually fulfill on the event. So you're not relying on volunteers. Because the truth is, if your event, if you're actually running a legitimate conference, a legitimate workshop, a legit summit, whatever word you want to call it, if you're running a real event, I'm not talking about like the non, like the, hey, everybody gets in for free, no, I'm talking about, hey, if you're running a business, if you're using a conference or an event to generate clients, to generate leads, to sell products, if you're running a legitimate event like that, you're running a business, and you need staff who are trained, who are competent to help you run that business. But you also need the revenue to support it. So if you're running an event and you're relying on volunteers, but your event's legitimate, and that's what you're trying to scale, but you're still relying on volunteers, you're basically cutting yourself off at the knees because you're not going to deliver the product that people want. Now, I hear this sometimes on calls when I hop on, and they're like, oh, well, we've been running volunteers the past 5 years. Well, we can run this event in volunteers. Okay, well, let's talk about how your event has grown. Is your event growing? The answer is usually no. Well, why? Because the product you're delivering, the expectations set at your event, yeah, everybody feels good, they show up, but your event's not growing. There's something wrong. And that's probably because the actual product and the way you're set up isn't set up the right way. And then we can actually get into how we can fix that and what a better solution looks like for fixing all of those problems. But the fact is, if you're running a professional event, you cannot use volunteers. They will eat your event from the inside out. Things won't get done. They will disappear when you really need them. They will flake. There's no accountability. It doesn't work. Do not use volunteers for an event. You have to use professionals. You have to use people who are paid. Now, if, like I said, you can run your own operation, your own events team, great. You have that, awesome. But if not, bring in the hired guns who specialize in that one specific task, that one silo. So registration, security, parking, usher, whatever it is. Bring in those people, make sure they're good, so you don't end up with a 120-pound security guard guarding a professional or former pro athlete, which is ridiculous, but it happened. Make sure they're good, and things will go a lot smoother for you. All right. So I hope this was helpful. But if you are running a conference, a workshop, an in-person event like this, and you're looking to scale it, so you want to bring in more revenue, you want to scale, maybe fix your marketing issues, you want to get more people in seats, bums in seats, and then you want to improve your revenue, go to theconferenceaccelerator.com, check it out, book a call with my team. We've got a lot of material there for you, theconferenceaccelerator.com. Check it out, book a call. One of our guys will get on the phone, deep dive into your event, learn really what's going on, and we'll see if we can help you out. If so, great. If not, we'll point you in the right direction. No hard selling going on there. We just want to understand your event so we can think about, hey, well, this is how we can help you, or hey, this is not something within our wheelhouse. This is what we suggest. Perfect. All right. So check that out, theconferenceaccelerator.com. I'll see you guys next week.